Do you remember being a child in the 1970s, when the world felt smaller but full of wonder, walking to school, sharing breaks with classmates, and coming home to familiar streets? The joy came not from how much you had, but from the excitement of sharing moments with friends and family. Let's start with the day's very first sham sound. 1. Morning deliveries of milk and coal. Every day began with a clink of bottles left neatly on the doorstep. The milkman moved from house to house, placing glass bottles capped with silver foil where families could reach them first thing in the morning. That milk went into tea, over cereal, and into cooking, part of the daily routine. Later came the coalman, bent under heavy sacks, his face and clothes marked with soot. He tipped coal into scuttles and bunkers, leaving behind black dust on the path. Children watched as he worked, the thud of coal breaking the quiet of the street. Both deliveries were expected, relied upon, and never late. Milk kept the household supplied, coal kept the fire going, and together they marked the rhythm of the morning. Then came the most memorable walk of the day. 2. The walk to school. Children set off for school on foot, no matter the weather. Satchels bumped against their sides, scarves flew in the wind, and shoes splashed through puddles along the way. Friends gathered at corners, turning small groups into noisy crowds. Shortcuts became part of the fun. Through alleys, over walls, and across fields. The walk wasn't just about getting to school, it was about the freedom of being together without parents or teachers watching. Jokes, arguments, and stories filled the air until the bell grew close enough to be heard. By the time the gates came into view, the day had already started, filled with laughter, chatter, and a sense of independence. The walk itself was as memorable as the lessons that followed. Inside the school gates, our favourite bottles were waiting. 3. Milk bottles at school. By mid-morning, crates of milk stood at the classroom door. Each glass bottle was sealed with a silver foil cap, waiting to be peeled back or poked with a straw. Children tore them open quickly, eager for the short break from lessons. Paper straws bent and went soggy before the bottle was finished, leaving sticky fingers and quick gulps to empty the rest. Sometimes the milk was cool and fresh. Other times it had turned warm in the classroom air, but it was always drunk. The pause mattered more than the taste. Lessons stopped, chatter filled the room, and for a few minutes everyone did the same thing together. Bottles stacked by the window caught the light, part of the background of every school day. The milk break gave children a chance to rest and talk before going back to their books. It was a small moment, ordinary at the time, yet it stayed with everyone who experienced it. After milk, attention shifted to the lunch hall. 4. Classic school lunches. Lunchtime brought the whole school into the hall, trays in hand, the smell of food heavy in the air. At the counter, lunch ladies served without pause, spooning stew onto plates, piling mashed potatoes high, and adding vegetables that had been boiled until soft. The food was plain but filling, made to keep children going until the afternoon. Puddings were the part everyone looked forward to most. Jam roly-poly cut into thick slices, sponge cake covered in pink custard, or treacle pudding that clung stubbornly to forks were remembered long after. The hall was never quiet, filled with the sound of cutlery clattering, chairs scraping and children shouting over the noise. Even meals that weren't liked became part of the memory, repeated day after day until they felt familiar. After lunch, even the coins in your pocket began to change. 5. Switching to decimal money in 1971. In 1971, children in Britain suddenly had to get used to new coins. Pounds, shillings, and pence disappeared, replaced with decimal money that looked smaller, lighter, and unfamiliar. Sweet shops put posters on the wall to show how the new system worked, but mistakes were constant. Children stood at the counter, nervously turning coins over in their hands, unsure if they had enough for sherbet dips, licorice sticks, or a strip of toffees. Shopkeepers often helped, sliding the right change back with patience or quietly correcting sums. For weeks, every trip to the shop felt like a maths lesson mixed with excitement. The coins looked modern but lacked the weight and charm of the old pennies, and many children missed the heavy clink in their pockets. Still, the new system stuck quickly, and soon the coins felt normal, and after the coins came the sweets themselves. 6. Spangles and sherbet dip treats. For many children, sweets were the highlight of the day, and none were more remembered than spangles and sherbet dips. Spangles came wrapped in bright paper, neat little squares that seemed to last forever if you let them melt slowly. They were cheap enough to buy with pocket money and always handy to trade or share in the playground. Sherbet dips brought more excitement. Each packet held a chalky lolly and a bag of fizzy powder. and dipping the lolly inside sent sugar dust flying everywhere. Fingers ended up sticky, lips coated in sugar, and faces scrunched from the sharp fizz that hit the tongue. Some children ignored the lolly altogether, tearing open the packet and tipping sherbet straight into their mouths. The taste and the mess both stuck in memory, a reminder of childhood freedom. But when thirst struck, nothing beat bottled pop. 7. Fizzy Pop, Tizer and Corona. Shops in the 1970s lined their shelves with glass bottles of pop, colours gleaming under the light. Tizer stood out with its sharp red fizz, while Corona offered fruity flavours that felt special on a hot afternoon. Opening a bottle meant the hiss of the cap being pried off and the rush of bubbles racing to the top. The first sip often stung your throat, making children laugh as they tried to swallow quickly. Empty bottles weren't thrown away. They were carried back to the shop for pennies in return, starting the cycle all over again. It felt clever, trading glass for coins that went straight into sweets or another drink. Pop wasn't an everyday purchase, but when it came, it made the day brighter. Soon, another craze took over, one made of foil packets and paper albums. 8. Panini football sticker collections. The arrival of a new Panini album meant excitement in every playground. Children saved coins for foil packets, ripping them open to see which players were inside. The smell of fresh ink and the shine of new stickers never lost its thrill. Swapping became serious business, doubles stacked neatly in hands as trades were made, bargained and sometimes argued over. A rare sticker could change everything, drawing crowds around to watch as deals were struck. Completing a page felt like a victory, the final empty square filled with pride. Albums grew worn from handling, carried to school daily and guarded closely. Children remembered the sound of coins on shop counters and the buzz of trading at break time. The albums stayed long after the season ended, pages that held more than pictures. They held memories of childhood competition and joy. And when the school term ended, freedom stretched out for 6 long weeks. 9. Endless 6-week summer holidays. The start of the holidays felt like stepping into another world. 6 weeks stretched ahead with no lessons, no alarms, and no plans. Mornings began with a quick bite before heading outside, where the streets turned into football pitches and fields became forts. Sometimes whole afternoons passed with nothing but a stick, a ball, and the endless imagination that made every corner feel like an adventure. Games lasted for hours, broken only by the call for lunch or the sight of the sun starting to dip. Even boredom had its place, sparking new games and adventures out of nothing at all. Children came home grass-stained, shoes scuffed, and faces glowing from the sun. Evenings carried the smell of cut grass and warm air, the light lasting late into the night. Every day was different and belonged to the children. But when it came to showing off in the street, no bike mattered more than the one. 10. Rally Chopper, the bike to have. The Rally Chopper was the bike every child wanted. Its long padded seat, tall handlebars, and gear lever set in the middle made it look unlike anything else. Heavy to ride but stylish to be seen with, it was a symbol of status as much as transport. Owning one meant joining an unspoken club, a circle of kids who suddenly felt taller, faster, and more important whenever those bikes appeared outside a house. Children who had one quickly became the center of attention, their bikes lined up outside houses as others looked on with envy. Skids, wheelies, and daring rides filled afternoons, every scrape on a knee or elbow worn proudly as proof. The chopper wasn't fast or practical, but it carried status. It was about showing off, about belonging to a group that owned the coolest thing on the street. Even now, the sight of a chopper brings back memories of freedom, friends, and long afternoons spent racing until the light faded. And while the bikes rolled down the street, radios filled the houses with music. 11. Radio 1 Top 40 Countdown. Sunday afternoons carried their own excitement. Families tuned into Radio 1 to hear the Top 40 countdown. Children sitting close by with cassette recorders ready to tape their favourite songs. Fingers hovered over the buttons, waiting for the exact moment to press record, hoping the DJ wouldn't talk over the intro. The living room seemed to shrink during those hours, the air thick with focus as everyone listened for the sound of their favourite track. Every shift in the charts was taken seriously. with arguments at school the next day over who had made it to number 1 or who had fallen off the list. Homemade tapes were rewound and replayed until the ribbon inside began to stretch, the hiss and crackle part of the sound itself. Collections of scribbled titles on cassette cases became badges of pride. For many, the countdown wasn't just music, it turned songs into memories. Each track held meaning tied to a time and place in childhood that can still be recalled with a few notes today. And when the radio was switched off, the game started on the carpet. 12. Family evenings with board games. Evenings at home often meant the carpet covered in boards and counters. Families gathered around Cluedo, Monopoly, or Ludo, each dice roll changing the mood instantly. A winning streak brought laughter, but a bad run could lead to sulks, arguments, or the board being slammed shut in frustration. Yet the games always returned, started again with the same excitement. The chatter between turns filled the room as much as the dice, with parents sharing stories and children learning how to argue their corner. Biscuits in a tin, mugs of tea nearby, and the clatter of dice against the board became part of the routine. These games were noisy and competitive, but they brought everyone together in a way television never did. Each game left behind small stories that lasted long after the pieces were packed away. For children, board games turned ordinary evenings into something special, and when Saturday came, another gathering happened in the cinema. 13. Cinema clubs on Saturday mornings. Saturday mornings meant queuing outside the cinema with just a few coins in your pocket. Inside, rows of children filled the seats as the projector flickered to life. Cartoons, short films, and serials lit up the screen, the sound of laughter and cheering filling the hall. Competitions and sing-alongs added to the sense of fun, the crowd becoming part of the show itself. The smell of old upholstery and popcorn clung to every visit, memories tied forever to the dark room buzzing with excitement. Walking back into daylight afterwards felt strange, the street outside quieter and less alive than the world on screen. You would often leave already planning next week's return. And when the screen dimmed, the television at home lit up with something special. Fortin Blue Peter on television. For children in the 1970s, Blue Peter was more than a television show. The sound of the trumpet theme stopped conversations, pulling everyone into the living room. It taught you how to make things from cardboard tubes, showed animals that became household names, and let you feel part of something bigger. The badges were the prize, worn proudly as proof you had joined the club. Episodes introduced time capsules, challenges, and projects that stayed in memory long after the credits rolled. Blue Peter gave children ideas, encouraged them to try new things, and showed them they could be part of something meaningful. For many, it remains the most memorable part of 1970s television. While the TV-guided afternoons, music filled bedrooms with vinyl records. 15. Collecting and playing vinyl records. Vinyl records gave music weight. Children pulled albums from sleeves, staring at artwork before carefully dropping the needle. Albums were listened to from start to finish, each song part of a bigger story. Covers turned into posters on bedroom walls, lyrics copied down and memorized, and collections compared proudly among friends. The hum of the needle, the soft crackle before the first note, and the stacks of records leaning against walls became part of growing up. Each record felt like an object to treasure, not just a song. Vinyl gave music a physical presence, something to hold, study, and love. And outside, the fashion of the time was taking over the streets. 16. Carnaby Street and the Swinging 60s. Carnaby Street in the 1960s stood at the center of change. Shops filled with bright clothes, bold patterns, and daring cuts replaced the greys of the post-war years. Young people rushed there for miniskirts, velvet jackets, and Cuban-heeled boots, wearing fashion as a statement. Mary Quant and Vidal Sassoon shaped the look of a generation, while music poured out of every doorway. Street performers, foreign visitors, and magazine photographers crowded the pavements, each one adding another layer to the lively scene every weekend. The street was about belonging to a movement. Tourists came to see it, locals returned again and again, and everyone felt the pulse of a new era. Carnaby Street symbolized the freedom and rebellion of youth, and alongside the shops came the sharp style of the mods. 17. The rise of the mods. The mods stood out everywhere they went. Their scooters gleamed with mirrors and chrome, polished until they shone like trophies. Suits were sharp, shoes spotless, and every detail mattered. They gathered in cafes, music blaring from jukeboxes, rhythm and blues setting the tone. Barbers offered their trims, tailors stitched their slim suits, and new coffee bars welcomed them as loyal regulars shaping their territory. To be a mod wasn't just about style, it was about refusing to blend into the background. On weekends, they filled seaside towns like Brighton, sometimes clashing with rockers in scenes that grabbed headlines. For children watching from the edges, they looked untouchable, moving in groups that carried confidence and energy. The mods weren't a passing fad, they were a youth movement that left its mark on British culture. At the same time, music from Britain was reaching the whole world. 18. Britain's music invasion of the world. The 1960s turned British music into a global force. The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Who, and the Kinks didn't just sell records, they defined a generation. Teenagers lined up for each release, playing them until the grooves wore thin. British voices filled American charts, stadiums filled with screaming fans, and guitars transformed garages into rehearsal rooms. Radio stations switched formats, magazines filled entire issues with band stories, and television beamed live performances into millions of eager households. Songs were about identity, shaping how young people saw themselves. Posters filled bedrooms, lyrics were memorized, and concerts became landmarks in memory. Britain wasn't following trends anymore, it was setting them. And with the music came a rebellion you could see in every strand of hair. 19. The long hair trend. At the start of the decade, short hair was the rule. By the end, long hair had become a symbol of change. The Beatles set the example, moving from neat fringes to longer locks, and millions of boys followed. Parents frowned, teachers complained, but the movement only grew. Barbers advertised respectable cuts, schools threatened detentions, and workplaces quietly drew up rules. Yet, teenagers still pushed boundaries with longer styles. Long hair was a stand against old rules. Dinner tables became arguments, schools tried to enforce haircuts, and barbers lost customers. For young men, every inch of growth was independence, a way to say they wouldn't conform. It wasn't just about style, it was about identity, and it carried confidence with it. And soon, fashion itself exploded in colour. 20. The Peacock Revolution. In the late 1960s, men's wardrobes changed almost overnight. The old greys and browns gave way to bright colours, velvet jackets, paisley shirts, and trousers cut wider than ever before. Boutiques like Granny Takes a Trip filled their windows with daring designs, while designers such as Michael Fish encouraged men to dress loudly and with confidence. Markets stocked bold scarves, television hosts flaunted new looks, and even politicians occasionally appeared in brighter shirts, signaling just how far the change spread. Pink suits appeared on high streets, floral shirts spilled into workplaces, and even office clerks began experimenting with brighter collars and bold patterns. For young men, fashion became a declaration, not a duty. The Peacock Revolution let men dress as boldly as women had been doing, and they embraced it. Streets looked brighter, mirrors showed pride, and style became as much about freedom as it was about fabric. Which of these childhood memories are you most fond of? Let us know in the comments below. If you learned something new today, make sure to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next one!